Hello, and welcome to White Space, episode 10. Fun with flags, but without the flags. And it's been a busy week this week, partly for disasters in data centers. I think, Bill, the New York Stock Exchange had a bit of trouble, didn't it?
Well, that was quite an extraordinary one because the stock exchange went down for 4 hours and there was no mass panic. Now, I don't understand exactly why that was, because the last time the London Stock Exchange went down, there was international headlines. They don't know why it went down. They think it might be the software upgrade, but they're not saying much more than that. But this is shortly after another number of, I think it was the Singapore Stock Exchange went down. Mm-hmm. So that was a physical problem, they think. Yep. This was, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if you're into your American institutions, the New York Stock Exchange went down the same day as United Airlines.
Oh, don't mention United.
Favourite carrier.
And Wall Street Journal and a few other people. And it was quite interesting because everybody straight away started screaming cyber attack, and turned out it wasn't.
There was also trouble in a European data centre. Colt's data centre in Milan was taken down for a few hours, apparently by a fire, and this which appears to have been in the power distribution system.
Is it my imagination, but I think there have been quite a few fires lately in data centres. Is there any common factor here?
I don't know. I think power distribution systems seem to be a factor, because I think that was the root cause of the one at the BT fire in Ireland recently. Apple had a fire in a data centre that was still being built, I think.
Yep.
But that was just the on the roof, and it was to do with the solar panels. Again, power distribution though.
Right.
What I found interesting about that story, though, in no way Colt has confirmed that it was a fire. They essentially said a power problem, and it was Twitter and sort of like citizen journalists who actually said, guys, there's fat stacks of smoke over your data center. Meanwhile, I, on a mission to visit the most interesting data centers, I've been to a mine, it's sort of like northwest of the country, in Chippenham. And basically, Arc Data Centers is a very, very interesting company. They run several projects, and one of these upcoming projects, now I can't talk about it too much.
We're going to have to say, we haven't had a story about it yet. Is that because they've sworn you to secrecy, or have you?
Yes, they did, and they threatened my relatives. And basically, part of the reason why I can't write this story is these guys have 1 million square feet underground in a limestone mine, and they're building a data center there right now. And they said, if anything happens, they can just people can just disappear there, and nobody will ever know. They pour a little bit of concrete, and it's done.
I heard it was originally a stone quarry, and it had been a nuclear bunker at some point as well, like so many of these underground spaces.
Yes, and it's next door to the Ministry of Defense, to a large underground complex as well. So they're still occupying part of the same caves and have one of the Trident command centers in there. So very good neighbors.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
By the way, what are these things? What were these cakes here for?
Well, we had a bake sale in the office. And
anybody know who it was for?
It was some kind of charity. Do you know, Max?
Max, do you know what it was?
It was cancer research.
All right.
Okay, good.
Okay,
right. Scientific breakthroughs.
Yes.
IBM reduced the die size. Not the die size, well, the resolution of the photographic process that it uses to produce chips. Mm-hmm. And I'll have to clarify the use of the word produce there. But essentially, they can now make chips at a 7 nanometer process, whereas previously it's been 10, just about, and mostly 14 has been the best ones going.
Yeah.
So it's a breakthrough. And because they're working at such a small such a small size, the size of the wavelength of light they use in the photolithography process is important. So to do this, they've had to go from visible light to extreme ultraviolet. Mm-hmm. The benefit of that is they can go much further than the 7 nanometers they've got. They can keep Moore's law on track for a while by keeping shrinking it.
I was just going to ask that. How far down can they go? Do they think they can go?
They didn't give me a figure for how far they can go beyond that, but given that that they've The wavelength they're using now is 1/10 the wavelength they were using for the optical process. The extreme ultraviolet has 1/10 the wavelength, and so you should be able, so that implies that they should be able to scale to 1/10 the size of the actual chip. So if they were working on 10 nanometers with optical light, they should maybe be able to go down 1 nanometer. It sounds ridiculous because by that stage you're getting to areas where the actual atoms start to matter.
That exactly, yeah.
So go IBM, or maybe go Global Foundries, because the weird thing is IBM doesn't even make chips anymore.
Yes.
So IBM sold its foundries to Global Foundry, which is backed by
Is the Emirate of Abu Dhabi?
I think so, yeah. And then and has become what they call a fabless chip designer, along the lines of Britain's ARM and so forth. But most of these people just do designs, whereas IBM, with this announcement, reminds us that it sold the manufacturing process, but it hung on to the research and development process. So it is creating the new processes, which are then commercialized through Global Foundries. This meant that, for once, in one of these announcements, they actually had a really good excuse when I asked them how long till we get one of these chips for real. They were able to say, we can't tell you, because it's someone else who's going to make it.
And these are going to be power chips, of course.
Yes.
I've got another IBM-related piece of news. So IBM SoftLayer, the cloud arm of the company, has started offering access to NVIDIA's most powerful GPUs in the cloud. And this is Tesla K80, and basically it's a video card on steroids. It's the biggest, the baddest they've got. And the interesting bit here is this is a new type of computing. So back in the day, like all of the supercomputing operations were carried out on the CPU, obviously. But CPUs, the very best ones, right? The latest Intel Xeons, they have about 16 cores. Like okay, with power you go to into the realm of maybe 64, or there's also some ARM chips coming into the market. I think also like about 64 cores. And this video card, it has more than 4,000 cores.
4,000.
Right.
So yes, it's a totally different weight category. So for massive parallel processing tasks, it is so much more efficient than using a traditional CPU. So now these things are available in the cloud for research organizations that can't buy their own supercomputer, and they can just go to IBM, get it when they need it, run their calculations.
Okay. Data center disputes and wrangling and arguments. We've had a couple this week. Firstly, Open Compute Project.
Very interesting one.
Open Compute Project started out with the idea of reducing the complexity of hardware, that vendors add a lot of badges and plastic and wasteful things to servers. Web scale companies don't need them, and you can do away with them. And you can also not worry too much about reliability. Well, you can make stuff as cheap as possible and put it in, so it's commoditized. You put it into a web scale data center, throw it away when you don't need it. Okay, but this week an argument has arisen around this, where somebody has accused the Open Compute Project of having poor testing regimes.
And that somebody was?
An anonymous test engineer who was reported on a different website. Other people have come forward, and there seems to be an actual issue here, which is how much testing do you need? How reliable do you need your product to be? The people working in these web scale data centers actually don't need that much reliability, because they can run their software across multiple hardware, pull it out and throw it away when it fails. In an enterprise data center, you may not be able to do that. In something like a supercomputing facility, you certainly can't. Yeah, I mean, Open Compute, or at least some Open Compute members, have responded. The important thing to remember is that Open Compute is an open source outfit. So it's up to any of the members to address this in the best way. And that, I think, is probably going to be the way it goes forward in the end. I mean, we've had a response from the founding executive director of Open Compute, and I would think that perhaps in future you're going to have people within Open Compute who need more reliable kit, will get together and through an open source process produce tests which meet their needs. Not everybody has to go with it.
No, that's right. Yeah.
And we sort of, whose phrase was it when it turns to the debate that it's sort of like don't treat your servers like pets, treat them like cattle? Yeah, because that's what open compute does.
I think that was Crawford. Whether he was quoting anybody else on an open source basis, I don't know.
Yeah, but it's sort of like that. There's a lot of wisdom in that, you know, like it explains the whole debate.
Yes, yeah, it does.
And open source means you design your own aspirin for your own headache. So if there are people in the project who need more reliable servers, they can find out. They can, in the open, develop a process that lets them do that.
Yes, and by the nature of the enterprise, there's the less of that testing to be done anyway.
No. Yes, okay, but I mean, there is an organisation there, so they'll need to find a way to get that through and worked through in the organisation.
Just as long as it's not new badges, because that would defeat the purpose of the whole thing.
But speaking of badges, the Uptime Institute has had a change of heart and a development this week. Uptime has always had two levels, it had all these multiple levels, these tiers, but two kinds of certificates. You can have, you design your data center, you get the designs certified to say that when you build this, if you build it this way, it will be tier 3 or tier 4.
Right.
You then build your data center, maybe to those specifications, maybe not quite to those specifications, but it's been said that there are data centers where they've built it maybe slightly differently, they're running it slightly differently to how they said, but they've still got their tier 3 design certificate.
Exactly. And
it's
the
on the
second
wall.
one is facilities, because I always found that confusing myself. It's design and facilities, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Design is the paper, facilities is the building.
Yeah. So essentially, but I mean, surely this gives Uptime opportunity to charge customers twice.
They have been. The Uptime development has been welcomed by Chris Crosby of Compass Data Centers. He's been campaigning for this for some while, saying that some data centers are misrepresenting, and I think this is a good thing, which is a shame, because otherwise I would be saying at this point it will end in tears.
That's great.
This looks nice.
Lemon drizzle.
Thank you, Cancer Research.
What the hell is this? I mean, look at it.
The rumour has it there's
That's
quite a lot of
Sergey's.
booze in there.
That's Sergey's balls.